My name is Lee Rowan. I was 32 years old when my younger sister looked at the dust on my shoes, the old leather satchel hanging from my shoulder, and decided she finally had proof that our parents had been right about me. Until that afternoon, Brooke Mercer-Hart had not seen me in 13 years. She found me inside Westgate Mall, standing beside a plywood construction wall where the last department store had once displayed expensive watches. Behind the wall, drills whined and hammers struck in uneven bursts. I had been reading a marked floor plan when I heard the quick, precise rhythm of heels stop behind me. Leah. My hand tightened around the plan before I turned. Brooke looked almost exactly as I remembered, and nothing like the 15-year-old I had left behind. Her coat was pale cream, her jewelry understated in the costly way that wanted to be noticed, and two glossy shopping bags hung from one wrist. Her surprise lasted only a second. Then her gaze traveled from my plain black trousers to the scuffed satchel I had carried through night classes, rented rooms, and the first years of my company. Something settled comfortably behind her eyes. She thought she understood my life. The second question that held me, there was not what Brooke would say when she recognized me. It was whether I could stand in front of her without becoming 18 again. I had negotiated contracts worth more than my parents' entire business. I had dismissed executives, defended budgets, and spoken to rooms where every person expected certainty from me. None of that stopped my heartbeat from changing when my sister said my old name. Family could reduce years to a single sound. What she did not know was that the unfinished space behind me belonged to a project I had spent 3 years building. She did not know why I was there, why the site manager had handed me the only complete set of plans, or why the company logo printed across the construction wall matched the logo on the building where her husband worked. And I did not know her husband was walking toward us. Before I tell you what Brooke said when she decided my clothes were evidence, take a second to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video. Stories like mine often begin with one person being told to stay quiet so a family can keep pretending everything was fair. This community is where we look closely at those moments, not to celebrate anyone's pain, but to understand the choices that created it. As you listen, consider one question for yourself today. If parents give one child every opportunity and tell the other child to manage alone, does later success erase the original decision? Keep your answer in mind, because mine changed before that afternoon was over. To explain how Brooke reached me before he did, I need to rewind less than half an hour. I had arrived at Westgate shortly after 2, using a side entrance beside a shuttered home goods store. The mall had once been Greystone's favorite place to spend a Saturday. By then, half the upper floor was empty, several fountains had been drained, and paper covered the windows of stores that existed only on an old directory map. Bridgeway Workforce Solutions had leased part of the abandoned East Wing. We were turning it into classrooms, interview rooms, a childcare suite, and workshops where adults could complete paid technical training without leaving their jobs for 4 years. I had founded Bridgeway 7 years earlier. What began with borrowed desks and 3 employer contracts now operated in several cities, but Westgate mattered differently. It was our largest learning hub, and it stood 15 minutes from the house where I had once been told that higher education was something our family could not afford for me. I was checking the revised accessibility route when the site manager left to answer a call. That was why I was alone with the plans when Brooke spoke my name. For a moment, neither of us moved. I also noticed how deliberately she occupied the space between me and the open corridor. Brooke had always been skilled at turning accidental meetings into performances. She checked who might be watching before she chose the version of herself she wanted them to remember. That afternoon, several shoppers moved past us, but none slowed down. The audience she truly wanted was still approaching from the escalator, though neither of us understood yet what his arrival would expose. "It really is you," she said. "Hello, Brooke." She waited, perhaps expecting an embrace. I did not offer one. Her smile tightened, but it remained in place. "Mom said you might have moved away again." The word again carried 13 years of family editing. I had moved once. I had given them my address. Later, I had sent emails, holiday cards, and an invitation to my first graduation. They had answered with silence or demands that I apologize for leaving. Somehow, in Brooke's version, I was the one who kept vanishing. "I've been in Greystone for years," I said. "Really?" Her eyes returned to the plywood wall. "Do you work here?" It was an ordinary question wearing a familiar expression. As children, Brooke had used that expression whenever our mother compared us and declared Brooke the one with greater potential. I could have told her my title. I could have pointed toward the Bridgeway emblem 10 feet above us. Instead, I asked how she was. She accepted the change of subject as confirmation. Brooke told me she had recently returned from a resort trip. She mentioned the neighborhood where she lived, then described a fundraising event she had advised as though a client list were a family update. She did not ask where I lived. She asked whether I had ever gone back to school. "Yes," I said. Her eyebrows lifted. "You finished something." The question struck with the careful softness our mother used when an insult needed plausible deniability. "I did." "That's good." Brooke shifted both shopping bags to one hand. "I always thought you could have done more if you hadn't run away over the tuition issue." There it was, not our parents' decision, not the money they had spent, not the account that had disappeared. The tuition issue, as harmless and ownerless as bad weather. I folded the plan along its existing crease. "That isn't why I left." "It was a long time ago." She released a little laugh. "I'm not trying to fight, I'm just surprised. You look." She stopped, but her gaze completed the sentence. Dust had settled across the toes of my shoes. My blouse sleeves were rolled to my elbows. The satchel's strap had been repaired twice, once by me and once by a leatherworker who told me replacing it would be cheaper. I had kept it anyway because it had carried every application, schedule, rejection, and contract that mattered before anyone knew my name. Brooke saw only something old. The strange part was that I did not feel triumphant. I felt the first warning of an old pressure, the sense that every fact about my life would soon be dragged back through a family argument and judged according to rules I had left behind. "You look exactly the same," she finished. "You don't." She took that as praise. For the first time, I wondered whether the life I had built could survive being seen by the people who had taught me to hide it. The answer was coming. Her phone lit in her hand. She glanced toward the escalator and brightened. "My husband's coming, you should meet him." I had known Brooke was married only because an aunt had mentioned it in a message 2 years earlier. I had never been invited, never seen a photograph, and never asked for details after learning how completely my family had removed me from the occasion. "He's done incredibly well," Brooke continued. "He's an executive. We're actually shopping for a second car today." "That's nice." My neutrality irritated her. She stepped closer, lowering her voice even though construction noise swallowed everything beyond a few feet. "You know, Lee, you didn't have to make life so hard. Mom and Dad weren't trying to ruin your future. They just knew college wasn't a sensible investment for you then. You left, refused to listen, and now." She indicated my clothes, my bag, and the construction dust with a small turn of her hand. "Now what?" Brooke looked toward the approaching footsteps and smiled with renewed confidence. "Now you're still struggling and you never got a real education. Meanwhile, I listened. I finished university. I built the right life." I heard a man say her name behind us. Brooke turned. Perfect timing. I looked past her and saw Adrian Hart, Bridgeway's chief operating officer, walking toward us with his phone in one hand and disbelief spreading across his face. He looked at Brooke, then at me, then back at Brooke. She did not notice the warning in his expression. "Adrian, this is Lee," she said. "My sister, the one I told you about." Then she faced me with a smile sharpened by years of comparison. "Lee, meet my rich husband. At least one of us understood what it takes to succeed." Adrian stopped beside her. "What did you just say?" he asked. Brooke blinked. "I was joking." "No, you were." His voice rose above the drill behind the wall. "Apologize to her." Her smile vanished. "Why?" Adrian's answer changed the shape of every secret our family had protected. Because she's my boss. For several seconds, the only movement came from a strip of protective plastic lifting and falling in the construction draft. Brooke stared at Adrian as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. Your boss, she repeated. He did not look away from her. Lee Rowan is the founder and chief executive of Bridgeway. Brooke's gaze snapped toward the blue and copper emblem on the wall. I watched recognition attempt to rearrange facts she had kept in separate boxes. She knew Adrian worked for Bridgeway. She had heard him refer to Rowan, the founder, and probably to me by my first name. But the sister she had helped erase was Lee Mercer. The woman standing in front of her was Lee Rowan. That's impossible, she said. It is. She searched my face. You changed your name. Years ago. And you own this company. Most of it. The answer sounded harsher than I intended, so I took a breath before adding, Brooke, neither Adrian nor I knew about this connection. Adrian finally looked at me. The shock in his face had acquired a second layer. He was not only seeing his wife's estranged sister. He was reviewing employment forms, wedding leave, office conversations, and every occasion when either of us might have known more than we did. I knew you had a sister, he said to Brooke. You told me her name was Lee Mercer. That was her name. You said she moved around and wanted nothing to do with the family. Brooke's eyes flicked toward me. She did. I felt the old instinct to defend myself rise so quickly that my folded plan bent under my fingers. I forced my grip to loosen. This isn't the place, I said. Brooke gave a short, stunned laugh. Of course you would say that. You stand there letting me make a fool of myself, and now you want to act professional. I answered every question you asked. You never asked who I worked for. You knew Adrian was my husband. No. How could you not know? How could I? That stopped her briefly. She had not invited me to the wedding. No one had sent a photograph. The relatives who still contacted me had learned not to relay family news unless I requested it. I knew Brooke had married, but Hart was a common surname, and Bridgeway did not collect an employee's spouse's childhood photographs or family tree. Adrian's voice became controlled in the way it did during difficult meetings. Lee knew I was married. She had no reason to know your maiden name or your family history. I knew she had changed her surname, but not what it used to be. There was nothing connecting those facts at work. Brooke turned on him. Why are you defending her? I'm stating what I know. You barely know her. I have worked with her for 20 months. The number seemed to injure Brooke more than anything else. Adrian had known me, in one limited part of my life, for longer than she had been his wife. He had seen me make decisions, accept criticism, lose contracts, correct mistakes, and stay late when a program failed. Brooke had entered the mall believing she possessed the only relevant version of me. Now someone she respected held years of evidence that contradicted it. She looked at the satchel again, but it no longer gave her comfort. So what? She asked. I'm supposed to believe she built all of this alone. I didn't build it alone, I said, but I built it without our parents. Her face tightened. There it is. There what is? The reason you kept this secret. You wanted a moment like this. You wanted to stand there and make all of us look stupid. I could have reminded her that she had created the moment herself. Instead, I placed the floor plan inside my satchel. My hands needed an ordinary task. I kept my life private because contact with our family always came with a price, I said. Today was not planned. I came here to work. And you just happened to be dressed like that. Adrian shut his eyes for a second. The insult might have amused me if it had not revealed how desperately Brooke needed appearances to restore the order she understood. I'm dressed for a construction site, I said. The site manager emerged through a temporary door and started toward us. He carried the revised permit packet and called me Ms. Rowan before noticing the tension. I thanked him, took the packet, and asked for 5 minutes. His easy deference removed the last possibility that Adrian was playing some elaborate joke. Brooke's color changed. How much does he know? She asked me. About what? Our family. Nothing beyond what you told him. Adrian answered before she could, which I am beginning to think was not much. Adrian, please. Did you invite her to our wedding? The question arrived so directly that Brooke's mouth opened without sound. I looked from her to him. You were told I declined. He nodded. Your parents said the invitation was returned. No one had ever mentioned an invitation to me. I remembered the aunt's brief message congratulating Brooke and the careful way she had avoided details after realizing I knew nothing. At the time, I had told myself exclusion was easier than another conditional invitation. Hearing that my absence had been turned into a rejection felt different. They had not merely removed me. They had used the empty place to prove I was the one refusing family. Brooke spoke quickly. Mom handled the invitations. You had my email, I said. You blocked everyone. I blocked Mom's number after she left 11 messages demanding an apology. My email never changed. I didn't know that. You sent a message to that address after I graduated. Brooke looked away. Adrian stepped back as though he needed physical distance to think. He was angry, but he was also my chief operating officer standing inside a company site while discovering that his employer was his wife's estranged sister. The situation could not remain a private family shock. It created questions about reporting lines, conflicts, and whether either of us had concealed information. I immediately pulled out my phone. I'm calling the chair of Bridgeway's Independent Governance Committee, I said. I'll disclose the relationship today. Until the board sets safeguards, Adrian, you should root decisions requiring my approval through Nia. Brooke stared at me. You're going to report my husband. I'm reporting a previously unknown family connection. You could get him fired. No one is being accused of misconduct. Adrian understood before she did. Disclosure protects the company and both of us. Both of you, Brooke repeated. Listen to yourselves. I find my sister after 13 years, and within 10 minutes you're making plans together. This is not against you, I said. Everything with you is against me. The words landed with the weight of something learned long before that afternoon. In our parents' house, opportunity had always been presented as a competition. Money spent on me was money taken from Brooke. Attention given to my work threatened the story that she was the promising one. Even now, with more than enough room for both of us to exist, she saw my life as an attack on hers. Adrian asked Brooke to go home. He did not threaten her or announce what would happen to their marriage. He said they needed to speak privately after he had completed his professional obligations. Brooke looked at me once more. The mockery was gone, but there was no apology in its place. Mom and Dad know about this, don't they? She asked. They know nothing about my company from me. They're going to think you hid it to punish us. They can think whatever they choose. I wanted the words to be true. My voice made them sound true. Brooke left with her shopping bags held against her sides. Adrian watched until she disappeared around the escalator, then turned toward me. I am sorry, he said, for what she said and for whatever I do not understand yet. I believed him. That made the moment harder, not easier. You are not responsible for my family. She is my family. Then what happens next is between you and her. At work, we follow the disclosure process. He nodded, though neither of us pretended the two worlds could be separated as cleanly as that sentence suggested. When he walked toward the temporary office, I remained beside the plywood wall and opened her contact. My reflection hovered in the black surface of the phone. Dust on my blouse, hair loosened by the construction draft, repaired satchel against my hip. Brooke had seen those things and believed the past had reached its proper conclusion. She had no idea that the company behind the wall existed because our parents once closed a different door. To understand why I left their house, why I stopped using their name, and why no one in that mall had recognized the connection, you have to go back 13 years, to a blue university folder on our kitchen table, and the evening my parents taught me exactly what they thought my future was worth. I was 18 when the acceptance email arrived from Greystone State University. I read it at Mercer office and print during my lunch break, sitting on a carton of copy paper because the only chair in the stockroom had a broken leg. The message opened with congratulations. I read that word 3 times before I trusted it. Greystone State had accepted me into its Business Information Systems program. The degree combined the 2 things I understood best: how organizations worked and how better systems could stop small problems from consuming entire days. I had also received an academic scholarship covering a little less than half the tuition. The remaining first-year amount was $11,800. That number did not frighten me at first. My parents had spent years telling me that if I maintained my grades, worked at the shop, and earned admission, they would help with university. I had done each part. I worked Saturdays, school holidays, and most afternoons during busy seasons. I knew which customers paid late, which printer jammed in humid weather, and how to reorder paper before my father noticed supplies were low. My parents called that work evidence of responsibility. I believed responsibility was the price of their promise. The promise had shaped choices my parents never saw as sacrifices. I had skipped a spring trip because the shop needed help during a school contract. I studied beside the binding machine when orders ran late, keeping one ear open for customers. Whenever friends asked why I worked so many hours, I said my family was contributing to my education, and I was contributing to the family. That arrangement made me proud. It allowed every tired afternoon to feel connected to something larger. I did not understand that my parents considered my effort permanent, while their part of the agreement remained optional. I printed the acceptance letter on thick cream paper, usually reserved for wedding programs. Then I placed it inside a blue presentation folder with my scholarship notice, financial aid estimate, and a page where I had listed every cost I could cover myself. I could work through the summer. I could keep a weekend shift during the semester. I could commute from home instead of paying for campus housing. I could buy used books, decline the meal plan, and apply for 2 smaller local grants. After all of that, I needed my parents to contribute less than they had once discussed. My father found me smiling at the folder when he entered the stockroom. "What happened?" he asked. I handed him the letter. Martin Mercer was not a man who celebrated loudly. He read the first paragraph, looked at me over the page, and squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," he said. For the rest of that afternoon, I carried those 3 words like a light. He showed the letter to 2 employees. He told a customer his oldest daughter had been accepted to Greystone State. Before closing, he promised we would sit down after dinner and work through the numbers with my mother. Denise reacted differently when she saw the folder. She congratulated me, but her eyes moved immediately to the tuition estimate. She read every line while standing at the kitchen counter. Brooke sat at the table scrolling through photographs from a school trip. She looked up long enough to say, "Good job," then returned to her phone. I waited for my mother to reach the page showing my plan. "You made all this?" she asked. "I wanted you to see what I can cover. You should have waited before making assumptions." The light I had carried home dimmed, but I did not yet understand why. "What assumptions?" Denise closed the folder. "That your father and I can produce nearly $12,000 because a university sends you a letter." My father entered from the hallway. He had changed out of his work shirt and was rubbing ink from the side of his hand. "She has the scholarship," he said, "and she can commute." "I can read, Martin." Her tone made him quiet. I sat across from Brooke and opened the folder again. "You both said there was money set aside." "We said we would help if we could," Denise replied. That was not how I remembered it. At 14, when I asked whether I should focus on schools close to home, my parents said they had started education accounts for both daughters. At 16, when I offered to increase my shop hours, my mother said my wages should go into personal savings because tuition support was a parental responsibility. Only 3 months earlier, my father had told me not to reject Greystone State over cost before we saw the scholarship decision. Every version of the promise had been clear until I fulfilled my part. "Can we look at the education account?" I asked. Denise's expression changed by less than a degree. There is no separate pile of money with your name written on it. You called it my college fund. Families move money where it is needed. Brooke stopped scrolling. My father pulled out a chair. Maybe we should go through the accounts before deciding anything. I have already gone through them, Denise said. The business had 2 difficult quarters. The roof repairs cost more than expected. Brooke's school fees increased. We are not taking out loans when Lee has other options. I turned toward Brooke without meaning to. She attended Ashbury Preparatory Academy, where the annual fees were higher than the amount I needed after my scholarship. My parents had enrolled her because Denise believed smaller classes and the right social network would position her for an elite university. What other options? I asked. Work for a year, take inexpensive classes, reapply when you know what you actually want. I know what I want. At 18, everyone thinks they know. I looked at my father. He studied the table. Dad. He exhaled slowly. Deferring 1 year would not destroy anything. Would Brooke be expected to defer? Brooke's head lifted. Denise answered for her. Your sister is not part of this discussion. Her school fees are part of the reason you just gave me. She is 3 years younger and already established there. Pulling her out would disrupt her progress. And losing my university place would not disrupt mine. Denise pressed her fingertips against the closed folder. This is exactly why I did not want to discuss finances before you had time to calm down. I had not raised my voice. Still, I recognized the warning. If I reacted to the decision, my reaction would become the problem. Brooke shifted in her chair. I didn't ask her to spend the money on me. I didn't say you did. It sounds like you blame me for getting into a good school. I'm asking why there is money for that school and none for mine. My mother's face hardened. Because we cannot reverse every commitment to accommodate a new one. My education isn't new. The amount is. I opened my scholarship page and placed it before her. Then tell me what you can contribute. It does not have to be all of it. I can ask the university about installments. I can work more hours in summer. I can apply for a federal loan for part. I need an honest number. For a moment, I thought the plan might reach her. Denise respected numbers. She managed the shop accounts, household bills, insurance renewals, and every purchase large enough to require discussion. She pushed the scholarship page back. 0, she said. The word did not sound angry. That made it more final. We cannot contribute anything to your tuition this year. My father started to speak, but she continued. You are capable, Lee. You have always been capable. You can work, save, and begin later. Brooke needs stability now. You do not. There was the compliment that had followed me throughout childhood. Capable meant I could carry more. Capable meant help should go to someone else. Capable meant every burden I survived became evidence that I had never needed relief. I looked at my father again. Is that your answer, too? He rubbed the remaining ink on his hand with his thumb. It is the answer we can give right now. I closed the folder carefully. The paper inside made a soft, expensive sound. The following morning, Denise behaved as though the discussion had ended responsibly. She reminded me to submit a deferment request before Greystone State's deadline. My father offered me additional summer hours at the shop. Brooke complained that the family conversation had made her feel guilty for attending school. I spent the day trying to convert 0 into another plan. I called the university financial aid office during my lunch break. A counselor explained that accepting more loans would still leave an immediate gap. My scholarship could be deferred for 1 academic year, but it was not guaranteed beyond that. Campus employment would help with later expenses, not the first payment. Every path required time, signatures, or money my parents controlled. That evening, I found Brooke in the driveway taking photographs beside a silver compact car. A red ribbon stretched across its hood. My mother stood near the porch holding the spare key. My father had left the dealership plate frame in place. Brooke saw me at the gate and smiled with the uncertain excitement of someone who knew the timing was wrong, but intended to enjoy the gift anyway. It's used, Denise said before I asked anything, and she needs reliable transportation for school. Brooke's school operated a bus route that stopped 6 minutes from our house. I looked through the windshield at the temporary sales document. I had processed enough vehicle invoices at the shop to recognize the financed price. It was not $12,000, but it was close enough to make my mother's claim impossible to believe. The next week, Brooke's summer leadership trip was paid in full. Her private school account remained current. New luggage arrived at the house. My mother continued describing each expense as a commitment the family could not reverse. Only my future had become optional. I still did not know that the education account itself had already been emptied. I discovered that later, after I made the mistake of believing deferment meant delay rather than denial. At 18, I was still trying to be the daughter who solved problems without accusing anyone. I folded my acceptance letter back into its blue folder, submitted the deferment form, and told myself 1 year was survivable. My parents had always depended on my ability to survive what they chose for me. They were about to discover that surviving their decision did not mean remaining available for the next one. For 2 weeks, I obeyed the plan my parents had selected for me. I filed the deferment request. I increased my hours at Mercer office and print. I answered customers with the same polite voice I had used before the acceptance letter arrived. Every evening, I opened a spreadsheet on my bedroom floor and tried to build an $11,800 bridge out of wages that disappeared into food, bus fare, application fees, and the savings I would need if Greystone State refused to renew my scholarship. The problem was not only the amount, it was uncertainty. Denise would not tell me whether the family might contribute the following year. Martin said business could improve. When I asked what improvement would make tuition possible, he told me not to reduce everything to a number. That answer came from a man who priced every print job to the fraction of a cent. At the shop, Denise managed accounts from a narrow office behind the production floor. I had helped her there since I was 16. I entered supplier invoices, matched purchase orders, prepared deposit slips, and organized statements for the accountant. She trusted me with business numbers because she considered them work, not power. One Thursday, she left a stack of household documents beneath a vendor file I needed. I saw the name of the savings institution printed on the top page. Below it, in my mother's handwriting, were the words Education Reserve. I did not open a sealed envelope or search a locked drawer. The statement was already unfolded. My own name appeared in the description line of an account my parents had discussed for years. The beginning balance was a little over $18,000. The ending balance was $74.12. I stood beside the copier reading the transaction list while warm paper collected in the tray. The largest transfers had not occurred during the shop's difficult quarter. They had begun almost 2 years earlier. Several went into the household account near dates I recognized. Brooke's enrollment deposit at Ashbury Preparatory, a summer program, a competition trip, a large payment to the dealership that had financed her car. Not every dollar had gone to Brooke. Roof repairs were real. The business had struggled. The account was legally controlled by my parents, and they had the authority to move the money. But they had not told me. They had continued describing it as my college fund after it was nearly gone. They let me choose courses, work hours, and applications around a promise they already knew they could not keep. I made a copy of the statement because part of my job was preparing records for the accountant. Then I placed the original exactly where I found it and carried the copy home inside the blue university folder. That night, Denise served dinner at 7. Brooke talked about the leadership trip she would take in July. Martin discussed a delayed payment from a hotel client. I waited until the plates had been cleared before setting the statement on the table. My mother looked down and then at me. "Where did you get that?" It was mixed with the vendor documents. "You copied a private financial statement. You asked me to prepare those files for the accountant. That does not give you permission to inspect household accounts. It has my name in the description." She pulled the paper toward her. Martin leaned closer but did not look surprised. That hurt more than the numbers. He had known. You said there was no separate pile of money, I continued. There was an account. It had enough to cover the gap. You moved almost all of it before I applied. Denise folded her hands over the statement. We moved family money according to family needs. Then why did you keep calling it my college fund? Because that was its intended purpose when we opened it. When did you plan to tell me its purpose had changed? When a decision was necessary. The decision was necessary before I applied. Brooke sat at the end of the table, watching our mother instead of me. She knew the dates as well as I did. Her school deposit, her summer program, her car. Martin cleared his throat. The money was not spent carelessly. I didn't say it was. You are making it sound as though we took something that belonged to you. You promised it to me. Denise's patience thinned. A parent's plan is not a legal contract. There was no useful answer to that. She was correct in the smallest possible sense. I could not take them to a bank and demand a promise. I could only ask why they had expected my labor, grades, and restraint to remain binding when their commitment did not. I turned to Brooke. Did you know? Know what? That they used the education account for your expenses. She looked offended before she looked honest. I knew Mom said money was tight. That isn't what I asked. I didn't manage the account. Denise interrupted. Do not drag your sister into a financial decision made by adults. You brought her into it when you paid her expenses from the account. Brooke was 15. She needed stability. She was already on a path with commitments attached. I had commitments too. You had an acceptance letter. That is not the same thing as an established life. The sentence exposed more than she intended. Brooke's future was treated as real before it happened. Mine remained theoretical even after I earned it. Martin reached for the statement. Your mother and I believed you would have other options. Which options? Working, community college, waiting until the business improved. Why weren't those Brooke's options? He looked toward Denise, and she answered again. Because Brooke responds differently to disruption. She needs structure. You have always been independent. I was independent because you kept giving the help to her. Silence settled over the table. My mother's face hardened, but Martin looked down. Brooke crossed her arms. I never asked them to take anything from you, she said. You accepted it. Was I supposed to refuse school because you wanted a more expensive option? My option cost less than your school. Then maybe you should have earned a bigger scholarship. Martin said her name in warning. Denise did not correct her. I waited. That moment stayed with me for years. The four of us around the table, every fact visible, and both parents still more concerned with the discomfort of the favored child than the future they had taken from the other one. Denise finally lifted the statement. This conversation is finished. You can spend the next year resenting us, or you can prove that our confidence in your resourcefulness was justified. You did not have confidence in me. Of course we did. Confidence would have been supporting the plan I earned. You assumed I would survive being denied. For the first time, she raised her voice. And will you? The question was meant as a challenge. I heard the deeper bargain beneath it. If I survived, they would call the decision correct. If I failed, they would say I had never been worth the investment. There was no outcome in which they accepted responsibility. I took my copy of the statement and returned it to the blue folder. Yes, I said, I will survive it. Denise leaned back as though she had won. I had not yet understood that survival and obedience were about to become two different choices. The next morning, Martin drove me to the shop in silence. Halfway there, he turned down the radio and said my mother had handled the conversation badly. Then tell her, I said. You know how she gets when she feels accused. I was accused. She said I was ungrateful for asking about money promised to me. He kept his eyes on the road. The account was never legally yours. I know. Then, what do you want us to do now? I told him I wanted a real plan, a monthly amount they could replace, protected class time, an acknowledgement that the decision had favored Brooke rather than some vague claim that circumstances made every choice unavoidable. He listened until I finished. "Your mother will hear that as an attack on Brooke," he said. "That is not my fault." "Maybe not, but it is the reality we have to manage." He used the word as if all three of them formed the family, and I was the weather pressing against it. At the shop, he gave me the key to the supply cabinet and asked me to finish the quarterly inventory. The gesture was meant to show trust. It gave me more responsibility and no answer. For years, I blamed Denise because her decisions were visible. Martin's part was quieter. He translated injustice into a difficult personality everyone else had to accommodate. He could recognize that I was hurt and still ask me to absorb the hurt so he would not have to challenge her. That morning was the first time I understood that sympathy without action could maintain the same system as open control. I completed the inventory. When I found an error in the paper count, I corrected it before it cost the business money. My competence continued protecting people who had used that competence as their reason not to protect me. That realization did not make leaving easier. It made staying dishonest. Every ordinary shift after that felt like agreement with a future I no longer accepted. My deferment year began as an arrangement and slowly became a claim on every hour I possessed. Martin increased my schedule at Mercer office and print from 25 hours a week to 40. During busy periods, 40 became 50. He paid me, but less than he paid the full-time production assistant whose tasks I had gradually inherited. When I questioned the difference, he said I was still learning the business and receiving the benefit of living at home. In August, Denise began charging me $350 a month in household rent. "Adults contribute," she said. I did not object to contributing. I objected to the arithmetic. My parents had refused tuition because I could supposedly save by remaining home, then reduce the amount I could save because I remained home. Brooke contributed nothing from the money she earned occasionally advising classmates on outfits for school events. Her income, Denise explained, belonged in her personal development account. I stopped asking for equal rules. I wrote each difference in a notebook and concentrated on leaving. Greystone State confirmed that my scholarship would survive one deferred year. The letter should have relieved me. Instead, it placed a deadline over every shift. I needed to save enough by the following summer or lose the only substantial support I had. My wages would not close the gap. I applied for grants, but most required current enrollment. I applied for better-paying office jobs, but employers wanted credentials or daytime availability. I asked Martin to guarantee Saturdays off so I could accept weekend work elsewhere. He said the shop needed flexibility. "You told me this year was for saving," I reminded him. "It is, but I cannot damage the business to accommodate every plan you make." The business had become another commitment that could not be reversed. My future remained the only flexible expense. In October, I learned River County Community College offered an evening certificate course in office systems. It would not replace university, but the credits could transfer, and the tuition for one class fit inside my savings. It met Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6:30 to 8. I registered before giving fear time to disguise itself as practicality. On the first Tuesday, I changed clothes in the shop restroom, ate a sandwich at the bus stop, and reached campus with 4 minutes to spare. The classroom held adults in work uniforms, parents checking messages from babysitters, and students who had returned after years away. No one treated interruption as proof of incapacity. For 2 hours, I was not Denise's difficult daughter or Martin's dependable extra worker. I was simply a student with a notebook open in front of me. The feeling was so ordinary that it nearly made me cry. I kept my emotions quiet, copied the assignment, and caught the last bus home. For 6 weeks, the schedule worked. I completed shop orders before leaving. I studied after midnight. My grades were strong. Every class made the university dream feel less like a life that had belonged to someone else. Then Mercer Print won a holiday catalog contract. The job was larger than our equipment could handle comfortably. Martin added evening production shifts. On the first Thursday, I told him I had class. "Miss one," he said. "We need everyone." I missed Tuesday because the binding order ran late. Then explain the situation to your instructor. The course has an attendance requirement. He glanced toward the press where paper was beginning to stack. "This contract pays your wages." My wages are supposed to help me return to school. And the shop is what makes those wages possible. It was a circle designed to keep me walking inside it. I left for class. When I returned, Denise was waiting at the kitchen table. She had placed my rent envelope beside her. "Your father says you walked out during production." "My shift ended at 6. "You knew the order was behind." "I told him about the course before I registered." "You informed us. You did not ask whether the schedule was workable." "It is 2 evenings. During a period when the family business needs you." I stood across from her, still carrying my course binder. "When does the family not need me?" "Do not be dramatic. I worked through school. I gave up the university place for a year. I increased my hours. I pay rent. Now one class is too much." "No one forced you to defer. We discussed the responsible option." Her ability to transform a refusal into my choice took my breath away. Martin entered and closed the door behind him. He looked exhausted. For a moment, I expected him to say the missed hours had been managed and the conflict was over. Instead, he placed a revised schedule on the table. My name appeared on every Tuesday and Thursday evening until the catalog order ended. "The class finishes in 3 weeks." I said. "The client deadline is in 2, he replied. "After that, we can talk. If I miss 2 weeks, I fail." Then perhaps this was not the right time to take it. Brooke came downstairs while we argued. She was dressed for a school reception, and Denise immediately asked whether she had remembered the portfolio a teacher wanted her to bring. Brooke nodded, then looked at the schedule. "Is this about the community college thing?" "It is a transferable course," I said. "I didn't mean anything." She adjusted the bracelet our mother had loaned her. "It just seems pointless if you're going to university next year." "I need credits and a better job." "Then work here. Dad already gives you more responsibility than most people your age." Martin accepted that as support. Denise smiled faintly. They did not see the trap because it benefited each of them. I looked at the revised schedule. "I'm attending the remaining classes." Martin's expression closed. "Then you are choosing a hobby over a commitment." "Education is not a hobby. This family has kept a roof over your head while you decide what you want." "I decided. You refuse to help me do it." Denise stood. "That is enough." "No, it is. Every time I create another route, you block that one too. We are asking you to act like a member of this family. You are asking me to stay useful." My father tapped the schedule once. "If you leave during assigned shifts, do not expect to keep the same hours afterward." The threat was simple. Attend class and lose income. Miss class and lose the credits that might improve my income. Either way, the family would describe the result as my decision. I carried the schedule upstairs and placed it beside the blue folder. For months, I had believed patience would preserve both my future and my place in the family. That evening, I admitted the two were no longer compatible. I attended class on Thursday. The following morning, Martin reduced my schedule to 20 hours and assigned the better-paid production work to someone else. Denise increased my household responsibilities because, as she said, I now had more free time. I completed the course with an A. The certificate arrived in a thin envelope that neither parent opened. By then, I had answered an advertisement for a rented room near a bus line, applied for 2 jobs, and calculated how long my savings would last. Maybe later had finally become clear. It meant never unless I left. Completing the course required one last confrontation with the habits my family had created. After Martin reduced my hours, I considered withdrawing so the failed enrollment would not appear on my record. I had missed enough class time that catching up seemed unreasonable. The instructor asked me to remain after class. I prepared an explanation about the shop schedule and family obligations. She stopped me before I could turn the explanation into an apology. "Can you complete the work?" she asked. "Yes, if I have until the final deadline." "Then complete it." She did not waive a requirement or promise a higher grade. She showed me the remaining assignments and the hours the computer lab stayed open. The clarity felt almost unfamiliar. A rule could be firm without being designed to keep me dependent. For the next 12 days, I used the lab before warehouse applications, after the shop, and during every lunch break. I submitted the final project at 11:40 on the last evening. When the grade appeared, I stared at the A and felt no dramatic victory. I felt evidence accumulating. I could learn under pressure. I could organize competing demands. More importantly, I could finish something my parents had tried to classify as badly timed. Martin saw the certificate envelope on the counter and asked whether it meant I would demand fewer shifts. "It means I am qualified to apply for better ones," I said. He looked surprised, as if education had been acceptable only while it remained symbolic. That reaction pushed me to send the first job application before fear could stop me. Then I sent 9 more. 2 employers rejected me without an interview. One offered fewer hours than Mercer Print. The warehouse requested a meeting. My route out did not appear all at once. It became possible because I kept treating each small credential, saved dollar, and completed application as part of the same decision. I did not announce my plan until I had somewhere to go. The room was on the second floor of an old house divided into 4 small rentals. The carpet was worn, the radiator knocked at night, and the shared kitchen had one cupboard assigned to each tenant. It was clean, close to 2 bus routes, and available for a deposit I could pay without emptying my savings. I found morning work processing orders for a medical supply warehouse. The hourly rate was slightly higher than my pay at Mercer Print. A campus office also offered me 12 hours a week filing forms and answering the evening desk. Neither job was secure enough alone. Together, they made departure possible. I signed the rental agreement on a Wednesday. On Friday after work, I packed my clothes, course binder, blue folder, and the few possessions that felt entirely mine. The leather satchel came from a second-hand shop near the bus terminal. Its corners were scratched, but the stitching was strong. I paid $18 for it and placed my documents inside. Brooke found me tapping a box. "What are you doing?" "Moving." She remained in the doorway. "Where?" I gave her the neighborhood. "Does Mom know?" "She will in 10 minutes. Brooke looked at the box, then at the half-empty closet. "You're really leaving because Dad changed your schedule." "I'm leaving because every plan I make becomes another reason I owe this house more." "That doesn't make sense." "It will when you need something they have decided belongs to someone else." Her face hardened. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Make me feel guilty for having things." "I asked you once whether you knew about the account. And you decided my answer was a lie." "Was it?" She did not respond. I closed the box. "I don't blame you for being 15 when they moved the money. I blame you for helping them pretend it was fair after you knew." "You think you're better than all of us." "No, I think I'm allowed to want a future that does not depend on staying available to all of you." She left before our parents came home. Martin entered first and saw the boxes beside the stairs. Denise stood behind him holding grocery bags. "What is this?" she asked. "I rented a room. I'm moving tomorrow." Martin set down his keys. "With what income?" I explained the 2 jobs. "You applied elsewhere while working for me." "After you cut my hours." "I was teaching you that commitments have consequences." "I learned." Denise carried the groceries into the kitchen 1 bag at a time. Her calm frightened me more than anger. "You signed a lease without discussing it with us," she said. "You would have said no. Because it is reckless. It is a room near my jobs. It is an attempt to punish us. Not every decision I make is about punishing you. You waited until we could not stop you." That was true. I had learned what happened to plans shared before they were secure. Martin asked to see the lease. I showed him the address, monthly amount, and deposit receipt. He examined them with the careful attention he had refused my university budget. "This landlord can raise the rent," he said. "Not during the lease term. The warehouse can reduce your hours. I have the campus job. What about food, transportation, insurance?" I handed him the budget from my satchel. He studied it and sat down. For one hopeful second, I saw the father who had squeezed my shoulder over the acceptance letter. He looked worried rather than angry. I thought he might offer help, or at least admit why I believed leaving was necessary. "Come back to the shop full-time," he said. "We will stop charging rent for 6 months. You can save and reconsider." The offer sounded generous until I noticed what it preserved. My labor, his schedule, Denise's authority, no guarantee about school, no replacement of the education fund. "Will you protect my class hours?" He looked toward my mother. "We cannot promise the business will never need you." "Then nothing changes." Denise leaned against the counter. "If you walk out, do not expect us to rescue you when this experiment fails." "I'm not asking to be rescued." "Everyone says that until rent is due." "I asked for help with tuition. You said I was capable. I'm acting like you were right." She recognized her own logic and hated hearing it returned. "Do not twist my words. I'm trying to live by them." Brooke remained upstairs through the rest of the evening. Martin attempted 3 more versions of the same offer. Denise listed every possible disaster. I listened, answered practical questions, and refused to reopen the decision. The next morning, I carried my boxes to a borrowed van driven by a coworker from the warehouse. I made 4 trips between the bedroom and the curb. On the last one, I stood inside the entryway with the brass house key in my palm. Martin waited near the door. "Keep it," he said. "You may need to come back." Denise spoke from the kitchen. "If she leaves as though we are the enemy, she does not get to return whenever it becomes convenient." He said nothing after that. I placed the key on the table, beside the unopened mail. It made a small sound against the wood. That was the moment I left, not when the van pulled away, but when my father watched me surrender access to our home and chose silence again. The new room felt smaller after dark. Pipes groaned behind the wall. Someone cooked onions downstairs. My boxes occupied most of the floor, and the window faced the brick side of another building. I sat on the mattress with my budget and counted the money remaining after the deposit. Independence did not feel powerful. It felt exact. Every meal, bus transfer, and hour of sleep had a number attached. On Monday, the warehouse supervisor asked me to begin at 6:30. I caught the first bus at 5:40. At 4, I left for the campus office. I returned to the room after 9 and studied until the words blurred. I made mistakes. I missed one bus and spent money on a taxi I could not comfortably afford. I underestimated laundry costs. I ate too many dinners from the cheapest shelf of the grocery store. When the radiator stopped working for 3 nights, I wore my coat indoors and kept studying. What I did not do was call my parents for money. That refusal was not pride alone. Denise had already told me what help would cost, surrender of the decision that made help necessary. 2 weeks after moving, I emailed my address and work numbers to my parents and Brooke. I wrote that I was safe. I said I wanted contact if it could happen without demands that I abandon school or return to the shop. Martin replied first. He said my mother was hurt. The family deserved an apology, and the door might reopen after I acknowledged how disrespectfully I had left. The door might reopen. The key on the table had already become evidence against me. I answered that I was willing to meet in a neutral place. No one selected a time. At Christmas, I mailed cards. Brooke sent a 2-sentence message saying Mom was not ready. On my 19th birthday, Martin left a voicemail wishing me well and asking whether I had reconsidered. I called back. He did not answer, and no second message came. The following autumn, when I completed my first group of transferable courses, I sent them an invitation to the small recognition event. I included the campus address, time, and a note saying they did not have to discuss the past to attend. 3 chairs remained empty. Brooke emailed the next morning. She said our parents would not reward manipulation and that public invitations did not repair private disrespect. I read the message twice, archived it, and stopped sending invitations. That was how the story of my disappearance began. I had provided addresses, dates, and open doors. They had rejected each one, then told other people I wanted no family. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of leaving was managing alone. It was not. The hardest part was realizing that my parents preferred an absent daughter. They could blame to a present daughter. They could not control. The family story reached me through other people. An aunt called after hearing I had left without warning. A former shop customer asked whether I was settled down again. Someone from our old neighborhood, said Denise, had explained that I rejected sensible work because I wanted a glamorous university life. At first, I corrected every version. I listed the account transfers, the class schedule, the rent, and the emails I had sent. Most listeners became uncomfortable. Facts required them to decide whether they would question my parents, and they had called only to satisfy concern without entering conflict. I learned to answer more simply. I moved because I needed control of my work and education. Some accepted it. Others heard defiance because defiance was the role already prepared for me. One evening, Martin called the campus desk during my shift. He said the shop had received a large school order and asked whether I could help for 2 weekends. I needed the money, and part of me wanted the familiar competence of the production floor. I asked whether he would pay the same rate as the employee whose work I would cover. He called the question disrespectful. "You are asking me as a worker," I said. "I am answering as one. I am asking you as your father. Then ask how I am first." The silence lasted long enough for me to hear papers moving on his desk. He said he hoped I was well. Then he returned to the order. I declined. Afterward, I cried in the locked supply room for 5 minutes, washed my face, and finished my shift. Saying no had protected my time, but it also confirmed that my father still knew how to contact me only when my usefulness was required. That pain became part of the education my family never intended to finance. I learned that a boundary could be correct and still hurt. The first person who became my friend after I left home did so because I kept stealing her seat. Nia Brooks and I enrolled in the same evening database course at River County Community College. She preferred the desk nearest the power outlet. I arrived from the campus office 5 minutes before class and chose the same desk because it was closest to the door I needed to reach when the final bus left. For 3 classes, one of us arrived first and silently claimed it. On the 4th night, Nia placed a paper sign across the desk that said reserved by mutual inconvenience. I laughed before I could stop myself. We began sharing the outlet, then notes, then the walk to the bus shelter. She was 1 year older, worked daytime customer support, and planned to build a career in community services. She asked direct questions but did not treat every answer as an invitation to advise me. When she learned I worked 2 jobs, she did not call me inspiring. She asked which assignment she could proofread during her lunch break. That difference mattered. People often praised endurance because praise cost less than help. Nia offered time, then accepted mine when she needed it. I showed her how to build a tracking sheet for a volunteer program. She helped me practice presentations without apologizing for correcting me. Our friendship formed through exchange, rather than rescue. The campus office where I worked handled enrollment questions for adults returning to education. Most arrived after work carrying the same strained concentration I saw in my own reflection. They did not lack ability. They lacked hours, childcare, transportation, predictable schedules, or the correct form submitted before a deadline no one had explained. My supervisor, Marisol Vega, knew every regulation and refused to use that knowledge to make people feel small. She was in her early 40s then, practical and patient, with a habit of circling the exact line on a form that mattered. She noticed that I stayed after my shift to reorganize a drawer of incomplete applications. "Those are not your responsibility," she said. "They will become someone's problem next week." That is not the same thing. I expected her to tell me to clock out. Instead, she pulled over a chair and asked what pattern I saw. The applications were incomplete for recurring reasons. Employer signatures were missing. Training schedules overlapped with shifts. Students selected programs without knowing a required course met only during business hours. Some missed financial aid appointments because the available times were identical to their work schedules. I created a checklist that linked each program requirement to the moment it needed to be completed. Then I added a schedule grid showing employers when workers would need release time. Marisol tested it with 12 applicants. 10 completed enrollment. The previous average had been closer to 6. "This is more than a checklist," she told me. "It is a better order for information." That is what systems are. No one in my family had ever described my mind that way. At Mercer Print, noticing a problem earned me another task. Marisol treated the same ability as knowledge worth developing. She encouraged me to apply for a small campus position, coordinating evening student appointments. I almost refused because the hours replaced part of the warehouse income, and the pay difference was uncomfortable. Marisol did not promise that following my interest would magically solve the numbers. She helped me compare wages, transportation, transferable credits, and the possibility of an employer tuition benefit after 6 months. The decision still belonged to me. So did the risk. I accepted. The new position allowed me to reduce warehouse shifts and take 2 courses instead of 1. It did not make life easy. I still left the house before sunrise 3 mornings a week. I still planned meals around the cheapest groceries. One semester, a required textbook cost more than my monthly transportation budget, so Nia and I shared 1 copy and built a reading schedule. But the effort began producing connected results. Each course improved work I was already doing. Each responsibility gave me evidence for the next application. My path remained slower than the one I had planned, yet it was finally moving according to decisions I made. Marisol also noticed what I did not say. The first holiday after we met, she asked whether I was traveling to see family. I gave a vague answer about complicated schedules. "You do not owe me the story," she said, "but do not confuse carrying something alone with having resolved it." I disliked the sentence because it was accurate. For years, I kept our relationship inside careful boundaries. I asked about grants, employment, and course requirements. I did not ask her to fill the space my mother had abandoned. Marisol never tried. She offered guidance without claiming ownership over what I achieved. By 21, I had completed an associate credential and several industry certifications. The recognition ceremony took place in a community auditorium with folding chairs and paper banners. Nia's family occupied an entire row. Marisol stood near the aisle taking photographs of students whose relatives could not attend. 3 seats I had reserved remained empty. I told myself I had expected it. My body did not believe me. Each time the doors opened, I looked up. Afterward, Nia found me folding the program into my blue university folder. "You do not have to pretend this part does not hurt just because the other part is good," she said. I looked around at graduates holding flowers and certificates. If I let it hurt, they still control the day. Feeling it is not giving it to them. That idea took longer to learn than any course. The following year, Marisol asked me to help coordinate a pilot program with 3 local employers. Workers would receive paid release time for training, but the college and companies used different schedules, terminology, and reporting rules. The pilot was close to collapsing before it began. I built one shared system. It tracked attendance, shift coverage, required documents, tuition payments, and support requests. Leah tested the learner messages to make sure they sounded like instructions from a person rather than warnings from a machine. The pilot retained nearly every participant. One employer asked whether the college could coordinate another group. A second wanted to adapt the system for technical certifications. Marisol made sure the work was credited to me, then told me to price my time instead of volunteering it. "I'm a student employee," I said. "You are someone who solved a costly problem. Those identities can exist together." That was the first time I understood that the obstacles delaying my education had also taught me something institutions needed to know. I did not yet have a company. I had a shared spreadsheet, a second-hand satchel, and a folder filled with notes from people whose lives did not fit neatly inside traditional schedules. But Bridgeway's first real foundation was there. Opportunity failed when every institution expected the individual with the least power to coordinate everything alone. I knew exactly what that felt like. The pilot also taught me that a well-designed system could still fail if people with authority refused to use it. One participant stopped attending after his supervisor changed his shift without updating the college. The official record listed him as withdrawn. The employer listed him as unresponsive. Neither record mentioned that he had called 3 offices and reached voicemail each time. I found his messages while reconciling the attendance report. My first instinct was to solve everything myself. Marisol stopped me. "Bring the people responsible into the same conversation," she said. "If you rescue the process privately, the process learns nothing." We arranged a meeting with the employer and program office. I showed the sequence of missed notices without accusing anyone of bad intentions. The supervisor restored the training hours. The participant returned. More importantly, the employer changed how shift updates were reported for everyone after him. That distinction shaped Bridgeway later. Helping one person through a broken system mattered. Changing the system so the next person did not need rescue mattered too. Leah understood the emotional part before I did. "You always assume the person with the least authority has to be the most organized," she said after the meeting. "Usually they do. Usually they are forced to. That does not mean we should build around the unfairness." Her words returned me to the Mercer kitchen. My parents had called me capable, then used that capability to excuse giving me less. Institutions sometimes did the same thing. They celebrated persistence while leaving every obstacle in place. I began collecting not only successful outcomes, but the moments when success nearly failed. An unanswered call, an inflexible schedule, a form no one explained, a family demand that consumed study time. Those notes gave our later company its real purpose. Marisol made one other correction that stayed with me. When I thanked her for changing my life, she refused the whole sentence. "I showed you where some doors were," she said. "You walked through them, and you have held several open for other people. Do not turn gratitude into another way of giving away your agency." My family had taught me that receiving help created debt. Marisol taught me that ethical help increased what a person could choose. Years later, when Bridgeway designed its learner services, that became the standard. Support was successful only if it left people with more authority over their own lives. The system worked because responsibility moved toward the institutions with authority. That principle challenged everything I had learned at home, where responsibility always traveled toward the person least able to refuse it. I began imagining a service that would make colleges and employers coordinate before asking exhausted students to compensate for institutional gaps alone. I changed my surname at 23. The decision came after a routine form asked me to list an emergency contact. I stared at the blank line longer than the form deserved. Writing Mercer felt like signing myself back into a family structure that existed only when I obeyed it. Rowan had been my grandmother Evelyn's surname. She died before my university acceptance and left no hidden money, property, or solution. What she gave me was simpler. She treated attention as something children did not have to compete for. When I was young, she listened to my questions without comparing them to Brooke's achievements. I did not adopt her name to pretend I belonged to a different mother. I adopted it because identity could preserve a value instead of a wound. The legal process was ordinary. Forms, a fee, a hearing, new identification, new payroll records. No music played when the clerk handed back the approved document. I walked outside as Lee Rowan and caught the same bus to work. Still, the name created a boundary I had chosen. By then, the employer training pilot had expanded. Marisol's college could manage its academic responsibilities, but companies needed help coordinating schedules, reporting, tuition invoices, and learner support. I began consulting on weekends. Leah joined me after reviewing the first service agreement and finding 3 paragraphs that sounded as though I intended to work without sleeping. "You priced the system," she said. "You forgot the humans operating it. The client said the budget was fixed. Then the work has to be smaller." No one had taught me that capacity was a legitimate boundary. At home, competence meant absorbing whatever remained. In business, that habit would have destroyed us before we began. We named the service Bridgeway because neither of us believed one traditional route should decide who reached opportunity. At first, Bridgeway was not a company so much as 2 people carrying laptops between borrowed meeting rooms. Our first independent employer contract covered 40 warehouse workers seeking technical credentials. We created schedules, arranged release time, coordinated with instructors, and tracked the small emergencies that caused people to disappear from programs. A childcare provider canceled. A bus route changed. A supervisor refused to sign attendance sheets. Each problem seemed minor to the institution not responsible for solving it and enormous to the learner expected to absorb it. The contract barely made money. The second lost money because I underestimated support hours. The third employer paid 60 days late. I used personal savings to cover software and delayed paying myself. Leah kept her other job while handling learner messages at night. Marisol advised us, but she did not direct clients our way secretly or move college contracts without review. When Bridgeway competed for public work, we followed the same process as everyone else. I wanted support, not favoritism disguised as support. That distinction became one of our earliest rules. Our first major improvement came after Leah tracked the reasons participants contacted us outside business hours. Most did not need full counseling. They needed clear information at the moment a problem appeared. We built a response system connecting learners with the correct person before one missed shift became a failed course. Completion rates improved. Employers renewed. The college expanded its partnership openly after evaluating the results. At 25, I incorporated Bridgeway Workforce Solutions. I owned the majority. Leah received an early minority stake and became responsible for learner services. We rented 2 rooms above a pharmacy, bought used desks, and painted the walls ourselves. I carried the blue folder into that first office. The Greystone State acceptance letter remained inside, but I did not display it. I was not ready to explain why a closed path still mattered. Growth came in years, not weeks. We lost a municipal proposal because our company was too small. We hired too quickly after winning a manufacturing contract and spent 6 months correcting the mistake. I approved a scheduling product that looked impressive during demonstrations and failed under real shift changes. Replacing it cost money we had planned to use for expansion. Each failure taught me a form of leadership different from survival. Survival allowed me to carry the consequences alone. Leadership required me to tell other people the truth early enough for them to help. Leah was often the person forcing that lesson. "You do not protect the team by hiding the size of the problem," she told me after the scheduling failure. I was trying to fix it before everyone panicked. "They are adults, Lee. Give them the chance to respond like adults." I began building disclosure into the company's structure, documented decisions, independent review for conflicts, clear financial reporting, and authority that did not depend entirely on my mood. Those practices later protected Adrian and me after the mall encounter. At the time, they protected Bridgeway from the weaknesses I had inherited. The company expanded to a second city, then a third. We employed coordinators who had once been adult learners. We negotiated paid training time instead of praising workers for studying after exhausting shifts. We measured completion, but also the points where systems pushed people out. I continued my own degree slowly. Transfer credits reduced the cost. Bridgeway's growing income made tuition possible, but work repeatedly delayed the schedule. At 28, I completed the bachelor's degree I had begun pursuing at 18. Leah and Marisol attended the ceremony. I sent no invitation to the Mercers. That choice did not feel like revenge. It felt like accepting the answer they had given repeatedly. Afterward, I placed the new degree beside the associate credential in my office. The old acceptance letter remained inside the blue folder. Finishing did not prove my parents should have valued me. I had deserved honest support before any certificate existed. By 30, Bridgeway employed more than 100 people and served employers across Greystone and neighboring cities. By 32, the number had passed 200. We were profitable, carefully governed, and large enough that people sometimes called my path inevitable. They saw the later contracts, not the buses I missed. They saw the office, not the room with the broken radiator. They saw a founder, not the young woman calculating whether one textbook would leave enough money for food. I did not correct everyone. Privacy had become one of the ways I protected the life I built. That privacy also allowed my family to keep believing whatever made them comfortable. To Brooke, I remained Lee Mercer, the daughter who left with no degree and no plan. To my employees, I was Lee Rowan, the person responsible for Bridgeway's direction. Those identities existed in the same city for years without touching. Then our expansion required a chief operating officer, and Adrian Hart entered one life shortly before marrying into the other. Before hearing him, I nearly repeated my parents' pattern in a different form. Bridgeway's first program director made a costly reporting error and expected me to dismiss her. I was angry enough to consider it. The error threatened a renewal and forced the team to reconstruct months of records. During the review, we discovered that I had approved an impossible workload and ignored 2 requests for additional support. The director owned her mistake. I had to own the structure surrounding it. We corrected the reports, informed the client before they discovered the problem elsewhere, and changed the approval process. The renewal survived. So did the director's position. That experience clarified the kind of authority I wanted Bridgeway to practice. Accountability did not mean selecting the person with the least power and placing the entire failure on her. It meant identifying each decision that created the result. The lesson applied uncomfortably to my family. Denise had directed the money, but Martin authorized the silence. Brooke had been young when the account was emptied, but she grew old enough to understand what she was protecting. I had escaped, but I had also allowed privacy to harden into complete emotional isolation. Bridgeway became healthier as I learned to separate responsibility from blame. I was much slower to apply that distinction outside work. Financial security arrived quietly. The first year I could replace my entire childhood wardrobe, I bought 2 work jackets and kept the satchel. The first year I could afford a luxury apartment, I chose a comfortable home near the office and placed 6 months of expenses in reserve. Money gave me safety, but displaying it never interested me. That was why Brooke's mall judgment worked so quickly. She had been trained to read worth through visible spending. I had been trained to distrust anything that could be taken away. Neither response was created by the mall. We carried both of them into it. I also created a rule that no founder's story would become company mythology. Bridgeway could explain its mission without presenting my hardship as a requirement for success. I wanted learners to receive support before desperation made them impressive. That boundary remained permanent. Adrian joined Bridgeway 20 months before the Westgate encounter. He had spent years managing workforce operations for a regional logistics company. His references described him as demanding, fair, and unwilling to hide bad information. During his final interview, he challenged one of our expansion assumptions and supported the challenge with numbers our team had not considered. I hired him partly because he disagreed well. Adrian grew up in a household where one lost job could reshape an entire year. Scholarships, loans, and part-time work carried him through university. Bridgeway's mission was not abstract to him. He understood why paid training mattered, and he understood that good intentions could not excuse poor operations. We were not personal friends. Our trust developed through work. He told me when a deadline was unrealistic. I told him when efficiency threatened to treat learners as units instead of people. He improved our systems without attempting to replace the reason they existed. After a year, the board approved his promotion to Chief Operating Officer. His compensation, savings, and equity participation made him affluent by any ordinary measure. None of it came from the Mercer family. I knew he was married because he had taken wedding leave and later changed an emergency contact designation. I congratulated him, signed the leave form, and never asked to see photographs. Bridgeway employed more than 200 people. Respecting privacy was not secrecy. What I learned after the mall was how separately the rest had happened. Adrian met Brooke at a civic fundraising event approximately 2 years before our encounter. She was advising organizers on presentation and donor communication. He admired her confidence. She admired his steadiness and the life his work allowed. When family history came up, Brooke described an older sister who had left after refusing to respect their parents. She said Lee Mercer moved frequently, resented Brooke's education, and rejected attempts at reconciliation. Adrian did not investigate. People are allowed to summarize painful families imperfectly. He had no reason to imagine that the absent Lee Mercer and the founder Lee Rowan were the same person. During their engagement, he asked whether Brooke wanted her sister invited. Brooke said Denise was handling it, and later told him an invitation had been returned. The wedding was small enough that an empty place could be explained without questions. My parents told relatives I had chosen not to attend. The aunt who messaged me assumed I already knew. By the time she realized I did not, she was embarrassed and afraid of placing herself between Denise and me. Brooke knew Adrian worked at Bridgeway. She knew the founder's surname was Rowan. He sometimes referred to me as Lee when recounting a meeting, but Brooke heard a colleague's first name, not the name of a sister she had not seen in years. She never attended a Bridgeway event. Once, a schedule conflict kept her away. Another time, she dismissed an employee gathering as work networking and encouraged Adrian to go alone. My photograph appeared on company materials, but Brooke had no reason to study them. She preferred the visible results of Adrian's career to the details of the organization producing them. The explanation was not one extraordinary secret. It was a collection of ordinary distances, a changed surname, a missing invitation, professional privacy, family lies, and 2 sisters who had stopped looking for each other. After Westgate, each distance became evidence. Adrian later told me that, when he returned home from the mall, Brooke was already speaking to Denise. She ended the call as he entered and immediately insisted I had staged the meeting. He asked how I could have known they were shopping at Westgate. She changed the accusation. Perhaps I had known about the marriage through company records. Perhaps I had recognized his surname and waited for a useful moment. Perhaps Bridgeway's Westgate lease had been chosen because I expected to encounter her. Each possibility collapsed under an ordinary fact. The lease negotiations began before Adrian and Brooke met. His employment records did not include her maiden name. I had never accessed his emergency contact form personally. The mall was open to thousands of people. When Adrian asked why she had insulted me, Brooke said she had been shocked and defensive. When he asked why she believed I was poor, she said our parents told her I had never established a stable life. When he asked why she called me uneducated after I said I had returned to school, she said I always exaggerated. When he asked about the wedding invitation, she returned to Denise's responsibility. Adrian did not tell me every word of that conversation. He summarized only what later mattered to the professional disclosure. The detail I remembered was his conclusion. Every question had produced a new explanation instead of a clearer truth. While their marriage began that fracture, I was on a call with the chair of Bridgeway's governance committee. I explained the encounter from beginning to end. I disclosed my birth name, estrangement, lack of prior knowledge, and the fact that Adrian had defended me during a confrontation involving his wife. I requested temporary reporting safeguards before anyone suggested them. The chair asked whether I believed Adrian's judgment had been compromised at work. No, I said, but belief is not enough when the relationship is undisclosed. She asked whether he had ever received special treatment. Not from me. We should verify that independently. She asked whether any Mercer family business worked with Bridgeway. No. That answer would become important sooner than I expected. The committee scheduled a review for the following morning. Adrian would temporarily route approvals through Leah. I would be removed from any decision affecting his compensation or position until the connection was assessed. Neither of us objected. After the call, I remained at Westgate until the construction crew left. The empty mall grew quieter by degrees. I walked through the unfinished classrooms and tried to focus on door widths, lighting plans, and installation dates. Instead, I kept hearing Brooke call my life impossible. For years, I had imagined what it might feel like if my family discovered Bridgeway. In the least generous version, I pictured shock. In the most honest version, I pictured my father quietly admitting he had been wrong. I had never imagined learning that my chief operating officer was my brother-in-law, while my sister used his success to prove I had failed. The reversal should have satisfied something. It did not. Brooke's humiliation lasted minutes. The knowledge underneath it reached back 13 years. She had not merely underestimated my income. She had accepted a version of me that allowed every family decision to remain justified. My phone lit as I left the site. The message came from a number I had deleted but still recognized. Denise wrote that we needed to discuss what I had done to Brooke. Not what Brooke had said, not the marriage they had entered through a lie, not the invitation they had never sent. What I had done. The past and present had finally met, and my mother had already decided which one of us would be blamed. I did not answer Denise that night. I saved the message and sent a copy to my personal records, not because one sentence created a legal threat, but because my family had always depended on conversations becoming uncertain later. Adrian called after the governance meeting was scheduled. His voice was formal. I want to confirm that I will not participate in any decision involving your family, he said. Agreed. I also want the committee to review my recruitment and promotion, not only current reporting. I requested that. He was quiet for a moment. Brooke believes the review means you intend to remove me. Do you believe that? No, but I did not know enough this morning to imagine I would be asking the question tonight. I understood. Trust based on 20 months of work had collided with marriage, history, and information neither of us possessed. He did not owe me unquestioning confidence. He owed the company honesty. The committee decides the safeguards, I said. Your work will be assessed on the same record it had yesterday. And my marriage is not mine to assess. He thanked me for the boundary. Though it placed him alone with a decision, he clearly wished someone else could simplify. After the call, I opened the old email archive where I had stored messages from the first years after leaving. Brooke's graduation reply remained there. So did Martin's request for an apology and my unanswered suggestion of a neutral meeting. I searched for anything connected to a wedding invitation. There was nothing. The absence itself could not prove what my parents had done, but it prepared me for the question I knew Adrian would eventually ask. Had I rejected his wedding, or had my family needed everyone to believe I had? The next morning would begin as a governance review. It would end by opening a part of my family history Brooke had assumed was permanently closed. I later understood another reason Brooke never connected us. Adrian described Bridgeway through problems, decisions, and people, while Brooke listened for titles and visible rewards. She knew he admired the founder's judgment, but she never asked enough about that person to recognize the sister she had already decided was irrelevant. The distance benefited her. If Adrian's work remained a symbol of wealth instead of a network of relationships, she never had to imagine that one of those relationships might challenge the family story she carried into their marriage. The governance meeting began at 8 the next morning. Leah sat beside me in Bridgeway's conference room. Adrian joined from a separate office. The committee members had received our employment timelines, reporting structure, compensation approvals, and written accounts of the Westgate encounter. No one treated the situation as amusing coincidence. The chair asked Adrian when he first learned I was Brooke's sister. "Yesterday, inside Westgate Mall," he said. She asked me when I first learned Brooke was his wife. The same moment. We were interviewed separately after that. The committee examined who recruited Adrian, who approved his promotion, and whether I had accessed personal records connected to his wedding leave. Human Resources confirmed that his spouse's maiden name never appeared in the materials I reviewed. His promotion had been recommended by a panel and approved by the board. The safeguards remained in place while the review continued. Leah would authorize operating decisions normally routed through me. An independent compensation committee would handle any matter affecting Adrian directly. I would recuse myself from future business connected to the Mercer family. "There has never been Mercer business here," I said. The chair answered with a warning that later felt almost prophetic. "Now that they know who you are, that may change." The meeting lasted 2 hours. It was uncomfortable, exact, and necessary. No one reassured us merely because our intentions seemed good. During a follow-up requested by the committee, I contacted the aunt who had once sent the brief congratulations message about Brooke's wedding. She answered carefully. Time had not removed her fear of becoming involved. "Denise said you had been invited and would not come," she told me. "I assumed you had responded privately." "Did you ever see an invitation or returned envelope?" "No." "When you messaged me, did I seem as though I knew about the wedding?" She paused. "No, that is why I ended the conversation. I realized something was wrong and I did not know what I was allowed to say." The phrase "what I was allowed to say" revealed how far Denise's authority extended. Even adults outside our home treated family information as hers to distribute. My aunt apologized for not asking more. I told her I was recording only factual confirmation and did not need her to choose sides. She agreed to send a short written account. After the call, I felt an unexpected sadness for the version of myself who might have received a real invitation. Perhaps I would have attended the ceremony and left before the reception. Perhaps I would have declined but sent a gift. Perhaps Brooke and I would still have remained strangers. The point was not that an invitation guaranteed reconciliation. It would have allowed me to make the choice attributed to me. My parents had taken the choice, then assigned me responsibility for it. The committee also asked whether Adrian's knowledge of Mercer Print could have influenced any Bridgeway purchasing before Westgate. Purchasing searched vendor inquiries, proposals, and referrals. Mercer Print had never contacted the company. Adrian had never recommended it. The lack of history closed another possible conflict, but it also demonstrated how completely Brooke had separated her husband's professional world from her family's actual business. When I later showed Adrian my aunt's account, he read it once and returned it. "Brooke said everyone understood you would refuse," he said. "Understanding what someone might do is not the same as asking." "I know." He did not defend her. He also did not use the document to ask me what decision he should make. That restraint protected our working relationship at a moment when both of us could have allowed personal anger to create an alliance against her. I left the written account with the committee. It became one more modest piece of information, not a weapon. The review was establishing that nothing extraordinary had concealed the connection. Ordinary assumptions, ordinary silence, and ordinary obedience had done enough. When it ended, Nia closed her laptop and looked at me. "You have checked your phone 14 times. "I have not. I counted. There were 7 messages from Denise, 4 from Brooke, and 1 missed call from Martin. Brooke's messages changed tone as they progressed. The first accused me of concealing my identity. The second demanded that I tell Adrian the mall conversation had been harmless teasing. The third said his career could be damaged because I insisted upon making the relationship official. By the final message, she was asking whether I wanted to destroy her marriage. I saved each one and answered only the practical point. The disclosure was mandatory. The review was not disciplinary. I would not discuss their marriage. She replied that silence was an answer. "You are allowed to block her," Nia said. "Then she will say I refused contact." "She already says that." I placed the phone face down. Nia's expression softened. "This is what I mean when I say you carry arguments after the other person has left," she said. "You are trying to behave so perfectly that no one can rewrite you. Records matter." "They do. Perfection does not. A person committed to misunderstanding you can work with anything." The committee called Adrian again that afternoon. When he returned to the office, he asked whether we could speak with Nia present. We met in the same conference room, preserving the temporary safeguards. He had brought a printed copy of the personal history disclosure bridgeway required from senior executives. It listed potential conflicts, financial interests, and immediate relatives employed by company vendors or partners. His form contained no Mercer connection because Brooke had never described her parents' business as relevant to Bridgeway. My form identified my birth surname, but stated that I had no active family business relationship. The 2 documents supported the same conclusion. Neither of us had concealed a known conflict. Adrian looked exhausted. "Brooke says your mother handled our invitations," he said. "Denise says one was mailed to your last known address and returned." "Which address?" She would not say. I opened my email archive and showed him the message where I had given the Mercers my first rental address. I showed the later change of address notice, my graduation invitation, and Brooke's reply. I did not show him every cruel message. This was not an argument about which sister deserved his loyalty. It was a question of whether contact information existed. "That email address was active through your wedding," I said. "No invitation came there. Nothing came by mail." "Would you have attended?" The honest answer surprised me. "I do not know. I might have declined if attendance required pretending nothing happened, but I would have answered." He nodded. "That is different from returning an invitation without a response." "Yes." Nia asked the question neither of us wanted to place inside a professional meeting. "Is there evidence an invitation was created?" Adrian had requested it that morning. Brooke could show the guest spreadsheet, invitation order, and seating plan. My name appeared on none of them. After he confronted the absence, she admitted the invitation had not been mailed. Denise had said contacting me would create drama before the wedding. Brooke agreed and later told Adrian I had rejected it because that explanation felt easier than admitting she never tried. He delivered the facts without describing the private argument that produced them. "I did not need her to have a good relationship with you," he said. "I needed the history she gave me to be substantially true." I felt sympathy, but I kept it separate from advice. "You should decide what that means with her." "I know. At Bridgeway, the records support both of us." Nia added, "and the safeguards stay until the committee says otherwise." Agreed. After Adrian left, I remained in the conference room with the old messages open on my screen. I had once thought the ignored invitations were evidence of indifference. The wedding lie showed something more active. My family needed my absence to appear voluntary because a daughter who rejected them protected their reputation better than a daughter they excluded. Before the day ended, I asked the committee chair whether we should postpone Westgate decisions until the review closed. She said recusal addressed the known risk, while delay could harm partners who had done nothing wrong. Accountability is not the same as paralysis, she said. Continue the work you remain authorized to do. The distinction helped. At home, conflict had stopped ordinary life until I surrendered. Every meal, shift, and conversation became hostage to agreement. Bridgeway's safeguards allowed disagreement to exist without consuming unrelated responsibilities. I returned to the project schedule and approved an opening sequence that Leah had already reviewed. The action was routine. Its normality reminded me that governance did not remove responsible authority. Martin called again, before I left work. This time I answered. "Your mother wants a family meeting," he said. "About the invitation." He paused. "About everything." "Does everything include the tuition account?" "Lee, this is not the moment to bring up every old grievance." "Then it is not about everything." His sigh carried the same fatigue he had used 13 years earlier, as though my need for accuracy created the conflict rather than exposed it. "We have all made mistakes," he said. "Brooke's marriage is under pressure. The family business is under pressure. Your mother believes you are in a position to calm things down." There it was again, my capability converted into obligation. "Send me what you want to discuss in writing," I said. He resisted, then agreed. The message arrived 1 hour later. It requested a meeting about family reconciliation, Brooke's professional future, and a potential partnership between Mercer Office and Print and Bridgeway Workforce Solutions. The committee chair had been right. My parents had learned what I built less than 24 hours earlier, and they were already deciding how it should serve them. I agreed to one meeting in a private room at a neutral business center. I did not invite anyone to Bridgeway. I did not want my parents walking through our offices and interpreting every desk as property recovered by the Mercer family. Leah attended because Brooke's proposed employment and the printing contract involved the company. Adrian did not attend. His marriage was not part of the business discussion, and the governance safeguards excluded him from Mercer-related decisions. Denise arrived carrying a leather portfolio. Martin carried a box of Mercer print samples. Brooke came last and sat farthest from me. 13 years had changed my parents in visible ways. Martin's hair had thinned and silvered. Denise moved more carefully when she removed her coat. For one dangerous moment, age made them appear fragile enough to excuse. Then Denise opened the meeting. "We are here because this situation has damaged everyone," she said. "Which situation?" I asked. "The encounter, the secrecy, Adrian discovering the family connection in public. Brooke and I encountered each other. Neither Adrian nor I knew the connection." "That is difficult to believe." Leah placed a copy of the board disclosure timeline on the table. "It has been independently reviewed." Denise glanced at the document without reading it. "I am speaking as a mother, not a corporate investigator." "The request involved Bridgeway," I said. "That makes the facts relevant." Martin opened the sample box before the emotional subject could deepen. He displayed brochures, event programs, training manuals, and branded folders Mercer Print had produced. "We can handle regional volume," he said. "The shop has been looking for a stable institutional client. Bridgeway obviously requires printing." The word obviously performed too much work. He had not asked what we printed, how much was digital, or whether we had existing vendors. "There is a vendor process," Leah said. "Purchasing is preparing a request for proposals connected to Westgate and the other centers." Martin looked at me. "Surely family does not need to compete like a stranger." "Family requires more transparency, not less." His face changed. He had taught me how vendors padded invoices when customers failed to compare prices. He had taught me to document production tolerances and reject gifts from suppliers during bids. Those principles apparently became hostility when applied to him. "I am not asking for charity," he said. "Then an ordinary process should not be insulting." Denise intervened. "Your father gave you your first business experience. Everything you know about customers and production began in his shop. That is true. They both look surprised by the acknowledgement. I can value what I learned and still refuse a direct contract, I continued. Purchasing will evaluate Mercer Print if it submits a bid. I will have no role in the decision. Martin closed the sample box more firmly than necessary. Brooke spoke for the first time. What about me? What about you? Bridgeway has events, communications, openings. That is my field. You can apply for advertised work. Apply. Yes. You know my experience. I know what you described at the mall. I have not reviewed your work. She turned toward Nia, as though expecting a more flexible answer. Nia said, any role connected to the chief operating officer's spouse and the chief executive's sister would require independent selection. There is no position designed around this meeting. Brooke's voice sharpened. So you brought a witness to say no more officially. I brought the executive responsible for learner services and part of our community communications, I said. You requested company work. Denise closed her portfolio. This is exactly the behavior we feared. You are using procedure to punish the family while pretending your hands are clean. I am using the same rules we use for everyone. We are not everyone. That cannot mean you receive what other people must earn. The sentence exposed the center of the conflict. Denise heard family as permanent priority. I heard it as a relationship that had already demanded more from me than it returned. Martin tried a softer approach. Lee, the shop has 11 employees. A contract this size could protect their jobs. I am not asking only for myself. The request was real enough to hurt. I knew some of those employees. I knew what unstable orders did to their hours. But awarding work through guilt would not create a sustainable contract, and Bridgeway's own employees depended on responsible spending. Submit the bid, I said. If Mercer Print meets the requirements, it will be evaluated fairly. And if it does not, Denise asked, then it should not win. Brooke pushed back her chair. You enjoy this? No. You spent years waiting to have something we needed. I looked at her. At Westgate, you thought I had nothing and used that belief to humiliate me. Today, you know I have authority and call the same boundaries revenge. What answer would satisfy you? She opened her mouth, but did not speak. The answer where you say yes, Denise supplied. Nia turned toward her. That is not reconciliation, that is leverage. Denise's expression made clear that Nia had no recognized authority inside the family. This should be private. It stopped being private when the request involved our company, Nia said. Martin placed a hand on the sample box. Can we discuss Brooke and Adrian without corporate language? No, I said. Their marriage is theirs. Brooke looked wounded. He respects you. If you tell him the mall conversation was a misunderstanding, he will listen. Was it a misunderstanding? I was shocked. You insulted me before Adrian arrived. Because you stood there, letting me believe something that was not true. You believed I was poor because of my bag. You believed I was uneducated after I said I returned to school. You believed I failed because that was the version you wanted. She looked at our parents, but neither corrected her. I will tell Adrian only what I know, I said. The encounter was accidental. Neither of us knew the connection. Everything else is between you and him. Denise leaned forward. You can save your sister's marriage with one generous conversation. If her marriage depends on me lying, I cannot save it. The meeting ended without an apology, a reconciliation plan, or a direct contract. Martin took the bid information. Brooke refused the link to advertised work. Denise gathered her portfolio and said she hoped success had not made me forget who gave me my strength. I waited until they left before allowing my shoulders to drop. Nia remained beside me. They asked for a contract, a job, and control over Adrian's interpretation, she said. Did I miss the part where they asked how you were? They had not. That omission hurt more than every request. My parents had found me again and immediately focused on what my position could repair for them. Before we left the meeting room, Nia reopened the sample box Martin had forgotten beneath his chair. She did not touch the brochures. She studied the label on the carton. "They printed these samples for a request they received yesterday," she said. The label carried that morning's date. The programs advertised imaginary conferences. The folders displayed a version of Bridgeway's name set in the wrong typeface. Martin had spent the night creating evidence that his company already belonged near mine. I remembered him teaching me that a sample should demonstrate capacity, not merely aspiration. Several pieces showed impressive color work, but the binding on one manual had begun to separate. A multilingual packet used headings in the wrong order. The errors were not moral failures. They were exactly the kind of details an independent purchasing team needed to evaluate. "Do you want me to have facilities return it?" Nia asked. "Yes, with the same written intake notice any bidder receives. You could keep one folder for the archive. That would turn a private meeting into an unofficial submission." She nodded and closed the box. The exchange was small, but it clarified what my parents still misunderstood. Procedure was not a wall I raised when they appeared. It was the structure that allowed Bridgeway to serve people without requiring private access to someone powerful. The next morning, purchasing sent Martin the formal document upload instructions. He replied that personal delivery should demonstrate local commitment. Purchasing answered that every proposal had to enter the same secure system before the deadline. Martin forwarded the exchange to me with one sentence: "Is this really necessary?" I did not intervene. Nia reminded me that silence toward an improper request was not the same as abandoning a person. Brooke made a different request. She sent a portfolio link and asked me to confirm whether her events experience met Bridgeway's standards. I forwarded it to Human Resources without opening it and asked them to send the standard public careers page. No suitable opening existed. She called that humiliating. I wrote back that a promise from me would be less fair to her than a documented process. She answered that fairness was the word people used when they wanted to feel noble while saying no. For years, I had heard nearly the opposite. Family was the word people used when they wanted a yes without presenting reasons. Neither accusation changed the actual duty before me. When I reached my office, I wrote a note for the governance file describing every contact. The exercise felt severe until I remembered how quickly an undocumented favor could become the official version of events. The next day, Mercer Print registered for the vendor process. 2 hours later, Denise sent me a message asking how Bridgeway planned to acknowledge the family sacrifices behind its founder's success. I read Denise's message in my office with the blue folder open beside me. I had taken it from a locked cabinet after the family meeting. The acceptance letter remained smooth at the center and worn along the folds. Behind it were the scholarship notice, deferment form, education account statement, and the emails I sent after leaving. Family sacrifices. The phrase tried to absorb everything: my wages at the shop, the savings account, the empty chairs, the returned key. If my parents described the entire history as sacrifice, they could place themselves at its center and call the outcome shared. I answered with one question: what sacrifice do you believe Bridgeway should acknowledge? Denise called instead of writing. "Your father gave you work," she said. "We taught you discipline. We made the difficult decision not to finance a path you were not ready to appreciate. I had a scholarship and a complete plan. You had ambition without experience. Brooke was 15. You financed her school, car, trips, and later university. Was she more experienced? Brooke needed support to remain focused. You needed a challenge." I looked through my office window at employees moving between meeting rooms. For years, I had imagined my mother discovering this life and realizing the scale of her error. Instead, she had converted every achievement into proof of her wisdom. "You believe refusing tuition created Bridgeway," I said. "I believe you would not have become this strong if we had handed you everything." I did not ask for everything. That is how it felt then. Because Brooke already had everything you were willing to give. Denise exhaled sharply. You are still measuring love in dollars. No, I am measuring decisions in dollars because money was the reason you gave. She changed direction. Westgate will attract press. Your father and I should be present. People will naturally ask about your upbringing. It would be humiliating for the family if you suggested we did not support you. There was the real purpose of her message. I will not discuss you at the opening unless I am asked something that requires a factual answer. Silence can be an accusation. Then you understand what 13 years of it felt like. She became very quiet. We used tough love, she said. You may dislike the phrase, but the result speaks for itself. The result, as if I were a finished product and not a person who remembered every cost. The result is that I no longer trust you, I said. For once, Denise had no immediate reply. I ended the call before she could rebuild the argument. That conversation affected me more than I admitted. During a budget meeting later that day, I lost track of a question and asked for it to be repeated. At home, I opened the blue folder again and read my 18-year-old calculations. Every number was responsible. Every compromise was visible. I had not been reckless, unprepared, or entitled. Knowing that did not stop the old desire to make my mother admit it. Leah found me in the office the following evening. You are still trying to win a fair ruling from a judge who changes the law whenever you present evidence, she said. She is my mother. That explains why you want it. It does not make her willing to give it. The vendor process continued independently. Purchasing issued requirements for training manuals, event materials, multilingual learner packets, secure variable data printing, rapid regional delivery, and digital inventory integration. Mercer Print requested clarifications. Some were ordinary. Others asked whether experience with the founder's family could count toward references and whether equipment modernization commitments could be completed after award. Purchasing answered every bidder equally. Family experience did not count. Required capacity had to exist or be contractually secured before award. I received only summary updates because of my recusal. Martin called once to ask whether the requirements were designed to exclude small firms. I did not design them, I said. But you know Bridgeway's needs. You could tell purchasing that local relationships matter. That criterion was published. Mercer Print can address it in the bid. You sound like a stranger. You asked me to influence an active process. I asked my daughter for context. Those cannot be different conversations now. He ended the call disappointed, leaving me with the familiar sensation that applying a boundary had become the harm. Brooke's messages changed after that. She stopped asking me to reassure Adrian and began accusing me of interfering. She said he reviewed our relationship differently because he saw me as a respected executive. She wanted me to tell him that childhood conflicts were exaggerated by distance. I refused. 3 days later, she posted a public message without nomming me. It described people who abandoned family, concealed success, and then used professional power to punish those who had supported them. She wrote that public images of ethical leadership could hide private cruelty. Most readers would have treated it as a general complaint. People in Greystone who knew Brooke's maiden name, Adrian's position, and my recently disclosed connection understood the target. A local business account copied the post and asked whether Bridgeway's leadership had an undisclosed family conflict. 2 employees sent it to Leah. A community partner asked whether the Westgate opening remained on schedule. The post did not create evidence of misconduct. It created enough uncertainty to require a response. Adrian came to my office, but stopped outside because the temporary reporting boundary remained in place. Leah joined us in a conference room. I did not know she planned to post it, he said. I believe you, I replied. She says it is not about Bridgeway. Leah placed the copied business account message on the screen. Intent no longer controls the effect. Adrian's expression tightened. What happens now? The committee broadens the review, I said. Communications prepares facts. You remain recused. He looked at me. And you? I remain accountable for protecting the company without turning a family dispute into a public campaign. That balance felt almost impossible. Silence allowed the implication to grow. A personal response could look like an employer attacking the spouse of a senior executive. Every choice touched both worlds. I sent Brooke one message. Your post is creating professional consequences. Correct any implication that Adrian or I concealed a known relationship. She replied that the truth should not frighten me. Before I could answer, the governance committee notified us that an independent review would begin the next morning. It would examine the family connection, Adrian's employment history, my disclosures, and any involvement I had in Mercer Print's active bid. Brooke had wanted to restore the old story, in which I harmed the family. Instead, she had placed every record under examination. The next morning, I addressed Bridgeway's leadership team before the reviewers began interviews. I told them that the family connection was real, that neither Adrian nor I had known about it, and that the company's safeguards were active. I asked employees to preserve records and direct press questions to communications. I did not call Brooke dishonest. I did not describe the tuition account or the years of silence. Personal pain could explain why the situation affected me, but it could not become evidence in a corporate review. One regional director asked whether Westgate might be postponed. Only if the review identifies an operational or ethical risk that cannot be contained, I said. Do you expect that? Expectation is not a finding. That answer frustrated people who wanted reassurance. It also told them the process was genuine. Afterward, Leah and I walked through the unfinished learning hub. Electricians were fitting pendant lights over the counseling tables. Technicians tested privacy screens in the enrollment stations. A carpenter adjusted the open classroom door because it caught against the new flooring. The building held no knowledge of our family dispute. It responded only to measured gaps. A hinge needed alignment, a screen needed calibration, a cable needed a safer route. You are looking at every flaw as though it is a message, Leah said. Today, everything feels like evidence. Then use better evidence. She handed me the accessibility checklist. We tested the route from the entrance to each station, the counter heights, the captioning displays, and the quiet room's alert light. Concrete work slowed my thoughts. At the counseling desk, I found an older temporary sign that read student intake. The center would serve laid-off workers, caregivers returning to employment, adults seeking certifications, and people who had never considered themselves students. I replaced it with a draft sign reading "Start here." Leah approved. No identity test at the door. That phrase described more than signage. My family had decided support belonged to the child who looked as though she needed it, and responsibility belonged to the child who looked capable. Bridgeway's work began by asking what a person actually faced. The reviewers arrived before noon. They requested access logs, board minutes, personnel files, procurement communications, expense approvals, and the timeline of every message after Westgate. Information technology created a protected repository. Legal counsel explained what employee information could be shared and what required redaction. No single document could prove an ethical culture. The pattern mattered. Who held authority, who could challenge it, what happened after a conflict appeared, and whether leaders accepted inconvenience when rules reached them. I had spent 13 years building an organization partly because private power had failed me. Now the review would determine whether our infrastructure of accountability worked as well as the physical design. Before leaving the hub, I asked the site coordinator how many learners had completed preliminary interest forms. She showed me 312 names, each attached to a practical obstacle: transportation, schedule, child care, missing transcripts, uncertain eligibility, fear of returning to a classroom. The list restored proportion. My family crisis mattered, but it was not the mission. Every hour spent protecting Bridgeway's integrity protected those people from entering a program governed by personal favors. I asked the coordinator to add one field to the intake review. What information had nearly caused each person to stop applying? If patterns appeared, we could change instructions before opening day. She pointed to a frequent answer. Many adults believed previous debt automatically disqualified them from any new training. That is not true for several pathways, I said. They do not know which several. We scheduled a public information session and assigned a financial counselor to build a plain language guide. Work continued carefully forward. The expanded review lasted 9 days. During that period, I did not approve Adrian's work, speak to purchasing about Mercer print, or answer public questions about Brooke. Bridgeway's communications team issued one sentence confirming that a previously unknown family connection had been disclosed and was under independent review. The restraint frustrated everyone. Employees wanted reassurance. Community partners wanted detail. Denise interpreted the silence as proof we were preparing a case against the family. Brooke posted nothing new but refused to correct the original implication. The committee examined every stage of Adrian's Bridgeway employment. His interview scores, reference checks, salary offer, performance reviews, and promotion recommendation predated my knowledge of his connection to Brooke. Several decisions had been made by people with no access to my personal history. My own records were examined too. The committee confirmed when I legally changed my surname, what information appeared on my conflict disclosures, and whether I had ever searched Adrian's personnel file. System logs showed I had not. The process did not insult me. It demonstrated why written governance mattered. If the company expected families and employers to trust our programs, my personal certainty could not be the final standard. Leah carried temporary operating authority without pretending it was comfortable. You approve too many things that should already belong to other people, she told me on the 4th day. Is that your review finding? It is my finding from doing your work and mine. We used the temporary arrangement to identify decisions that no longer needed the chief executive. Even a family crisis produced a lesson Bridgeway could keep. On the 5th day, an external reviewer interviewed me for nearly 3 hours. She began with the part of the record I considered strongest, Adrian's promotion. Did you ever direct the panel toward him? She asked. No. Did anyone believe he was your preferred candidate? I believed he was qualified. My preference was one assessment among several. Did you communicate it? I signed the same score sheet as the other panelists. She placed the score sheets side by side. 2 panelists had rated Adrian higher than I had. The detail would have embarrassed a leader seeking credit. It reassured me. The reviewer then asked why my birth surname appeared in one legal archive, but not in public biographies. I explained that Rowan was Evelyn's surname and my legal name, not a disguise created for business. Early Bridgeway materials had used my complete biography, including community college and night work. Later versions shortened it because the company's story no longer belonged only to its founder. Were you trying to prevent the Mercer family from finding you? No, I stopped offering contact after repeated silence. That is different from hiding. She asked whether I understood how others might confuse the two. I understand the confusion. I do not accept the equivalence. When Adrian was interviewed, the reviewers tested another uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps he had unconsciously benefited from similarities between us before knowing why. He said he admired my insistence on measurable commitments and disliked vague promises. Brooke often praised that same quality when it benefited their household. The reviewer asked whether this resemblance had influenced his loyalty at Bridgeway. Professional loyalty should be to the mission and lawful decisions, not to a personality, he said. If I turned resemblance into preference, that would be another issue to review. His answer appeared in the final notes. It did not claim perfect objectivity. It demonstrated that he understood the standard. Nia's interview focused on my behavior after the mall. She reported every decision I made, including the moments when emotion showed. I had checked my phone repeatedly. I had considered postponing meetings. I had needed reminders not to answer accusations immediately. The reviewers did not treat ordinary distress as misconduct. They examined whether it altered company action. The records showed that it had not. That distinction challenged another lesson from home. Denise treated emotion as evidence that a person was irrational unless the emotion was hers. Bridgeway required people to manage effects, not deny human reactions. The committee also reviewed how the public correction would reach employees who had already heard rumors. We rejected a celebratory announcement. Being cleared was not a victory over Brooke. Communications prepared a question-and-answer sheet explaining the controls, the findings, and the permanent recusals. At an all-staff meeting, the committee chair presented the conclusion. I sat in the front row without speaking until questions began. An employee from finance asked why permanent recusals remained if no one had done anything wrong. Because circumstances changed, the chair said. A conflict can exist without misconduct. Controls protect decisions after knowledge appears. Another employee asked whether reporting concerns about an executive's family could threaten a career. Leah answered before I did. Report through the independent channel. The policy covers every executive, including the founder. I confirmed her answer. After the meeting, a program coordinator told me she had expected leadership to minimize the issue. Seeing the investigation made the ethics policy feel less ceremonial. That comment mattered more than personal vindication. A rule tested only against people without power was decoration. We changed 3 practices because of the review. Senior executives would receive an annual plain language prompt about spouses, family businesses. Founder-related conflicts would go directly to the governance chair. Temporary authority plans would be rehearsed before a crisis required them. None of the changes implied wrongdoing. They recognized that systems could improve after surviving stress. The reviewers also praised the recusal around Mercer Print, then cautioned that even receiving informal status updates could create appearances. I asked purchasing to send future family-related notices only to the committee chair unless legal action required my response. Giving up information felt uncomfortable. That discomfort proved the safeguard was real. By the time the preliminary finding arrived, Bridgeway had not merely defended its history. It had become less dependent on my restraint. Adrian remained direct. He responded to every request, disclosed each conversation with Brooke that affected the review, and did not ask me for reassurance. His behavior strengthened the professional trust the mall encounter had placed at risk. On the 7th day, the committee told us its preliminary conclusion. Neither Adrian nor I had concealed a known relationship. His recruitment and promotion were legitimate. Our immediate disclosure had protected Bridgeway. The temporary reporting structure could end after final documentation, though both of us would remain permanently recused from Mercer family business. Relief arrived without celebration. The review cleared our conduct, but it could not restore Adrian's trust in Brooke or change what the family had done. Purchasing completed the printing evaluation 2 days later. I received only the final summary. Mercer Office and Print had submitted a sincere but inadequate bid. Its presses could handle standard manuals and event materials, but it lacked secure variable data capacity, multilingual workflow, regional delivery infrastructure, and digital inventory integration. Its proposed price depended on purchasing new equipment after award. The financing was not guaranteed. 2 competitors met every requirement at lower risk. Mercer Print did not advance. The outcome was ordinary. That made the family response more revealing. Martin called me from the shop. We were never going to win, were we? I had no role in the evaluation. The requirements described a company twice our size. They described Bridgeway's work. You could divide the contract, give us Greystone and use another printer elsewhere. That would change the process after bids were submitted. It would protect local jobs. Then purchasing would need a business reason applied to every bidder. I cannot create one for you. He was quiet. You used to understand what this shop meant, he said. I still do. No, you remember only what you resent. I looked at the framed first Bridgeway contract on my office wall. It represented a time when one late client could have ended the company. Understanding pressure does not make me entitled to move it onto my employees, I said. Bridgeway cannot accept a higher risk bid because I know the owner. I am not just an owner, I am your father.